which is Clement Close. Could we have the introduction to this item, please?
Thank you, Chair. So item 5, as you say, relates to Clement Close, which is council-maintained residential estate made up of a series of 2 to 3 storey blocks and other single-storey bungalows with 88 units in total across the site. It's bordered by areas of car parking and single-storey garages and surrounded by 2 to 3 storey terraced and semi-detached properties on Milverton Road to the north, Mount Pleasant Road to the west, and Chudley Road and Elston Avenue to the east. And then to the south, so the immediate south is the grounds of Queen's Park Community School. The site is not located in a conservation area and has a PTAL rating of 2. So the application before you is part of Brent's new council homes programme and proposes the demolition of 1 bungalow, number 54, and the provision of 21 new homes in 5 separate blocks. So a net increase of 20 homes in total, with associated landscaping and replacement tree planting and cycle and refuse storage provision. Additional comments from Thames Water have been received in the form of 2 additional conditions relating to the foul and surface water capacity, as detailed in the supplementary report. But otherwise, the officer's recommendation is for the application to be approved, subject to the conditions and informatives set out in the report.
Okay, thank you. Any questions or clarification just at this point? No, we will then move on to speakers. Deborah Eppel is the first person who's registered. If you could come forward, please.
Good evening.
Good evening. Yeah, you have 3 minutes on screen, which should just begin as soon as you're ready. Please go ahead.
Thank you. My name is Deborah Eppel, and I'm here today to object the Chief Planner's recommendation to grant consent to this application. My objections are failure to comply with national and local planning guidelines, inaccurate assumptions, and major miscalculations. The application contains many breaches of the development plan, some of which are acknowledged in the committee report, including breach of BRE targets in the case of 50 Milverton Road and 12 flats in Clement Close. In the case of the flats, it was argued that the rooms impacted are 10 square meter kitchens and therefore are too small to be considered habitable. This is inaccurate, since in the 70 square meter properties, these 10 square meter kitchens double up as dining rooms where most of the affected residents take their meals. Several breaches of policy SPD1, breach of the 45-degree rule in the case of 52 Milverton Road, major breach of the 18-meter minimum separation distance in the case of 21 houses, a quarter of which had had a garage converted into a kitchen, living, dining combo, fact that is not acknowledged in the committee report. The new build would be only 14 meters away and directly overlook the main family room of the converted homes. Needless to say, this also goes against Article 8 of the Human Rights Act, which states that a person has the right to respect for their private and family lives. In addition, the current proposal is fraught with erroneous calculations. Most notably, the UGF calculation is inaccurate. In reality, it is at least 24% below what was calculated and way below the threshold of 0.4, which means that the proposal is also in breach of policies BH4 and G5. We're circulating the recalculation. The size of the play area is based on the projected occupancy of the new dwellings, but the many children already living on the estates are not included in the profiling. As a result, the proposed area is more than 55% below the requirements set in London Plan Policy S4. The parking calculation makes no provision for the staff and visitors of number 1 Clement Close. The approved application for number 1 included 6 parking spots, which are currently located on the site and have not been acknowledged as such in the committee report. Those miscalculations raised during the consultation period but repeatedly ignored render the foundation of the application invalid and open the applicant to a legal challenge. In conclusion, by granting consent, the committee would be in breach of their own regulations as well as show negligence for allowing a proposal which is clearly based on inaccurate calculations and assumptions. Considering that the site is located in a low priority development area with poor public transport accessibility, high flood risk, and that the proposal involves removing 14 mature trees and damaging at least 6 others at a time of recognized climate emergency, I am urging the committee to reject this application. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, and thank you for sticking to time. Would any members of the committee like to ask a question at this point, please? No, okay, well, thank you. If you could retake your seat, and then we'll be joined by Belinda Siggers, who is the next speaker who's registered in advance this evening. Okay, just like the previous speaker, you'll have 3 minutes, which begin whenever you're ready.
Sorry?
I said, as with the previous speakers, you'll have 3 minutes, which begin as soon as you start your remarks.
Sure, I'm ready. My name is Belinda, and I've been a resident of Clement Close for 22 years. I am speaking today on behalf of my fellow residents, particularly those with disabilities and vulnerabilities like my daughter. I stand here in firm objection to the Chief Planner's recommendation to grant consent to the proposed application. My objections revolve around the failure to acknowledge and recognize the special needs of our community, particularly the 12 disabled residents at number 1 Clement Close, and the presence of discriminatory elements within the proposal. The committee report unfortunately falls short in acknowledging the valid concerns raised by residents regarding the potential impact of the proposal on vulnerable members of our community. One of the many critical issues that needs attention is the inadequacy of the proposed 2-meter pavements on the eastern side. This narrow path poses a serious hazard for our residents who rely on sighted guides and wheelchairs, making it unsafe for them to navigate. Equally concerning is the potential impact on mental health due to the loss of green spaces. A community garden project spearheaded by the elderly and the children at Clement Close takes place on these green spaces that will be affected by the development. In terms of environmental impacts, the loss of canopy coverage in Clement Close would undoubtedly lead to a deterioration of air quality. This directly contradicts policy S1 of the London Plan on improving air quality and goes against the government's Clean Air Strategy 2019. My daughter has developed severe respiratory needs, and this is directly linked into the timing of the development of number 1, which was a well thought through project and which we in Clement Close were completely in favor of. In conclusion, I implore the planning committee to reconsider the chief planner's recommendation and take into account the unique needs of our disabled residents. Let us work together to create a community that is inclusive, accessible, and considerate of the well-being of all its members, which clearly this report hasn't done so. I thank you for your time and consideration.
Okay, thank you very much. Would any members of the committee like to ask any questions of this speaker? Yeah, Councillor Chappell, please.
Thank you for that. You mentioned about the pavements. I was just wondering if you have any other sort of amendments or comments that you to make it more accessible that you could highlight now.
Well, if there was a way of expanding the land, then I would have a comment. We have a finite, size of land, and so if we are taking away from it, we can't add anything to it. The proposal that is being made, there's the pavement is quite small anyway. So currently, all our vulnerable residents who need sighted guides don't use the pavement. They end up coming on the road. You can imagine if you have a sighted guide, a very narrow pavement, you can't walk side by side. So they tend to use the road as well. My daughter is in a wheelchair. She needs 2 people to go out with her at all times. That is the only way we can come out from our corner of the close, out of the close. So if this is taken, if the building on the opposite side is done, then we just cannot come out, because one person pushing her will just about make it, because the pavements are really small. So no, I do not have any recommendations on how that can be increased unless we have a way of stretching out the land, which can't happen.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Pleasure.
Okay, any other members of the committee like to ask a question at this point? Okay, so thank you very much, Belinda. We'll move on to our third speaker, which is Ollie Cooper. If they could come forward to the microphone, please. Yeah, as with everyone else, you have 3 minutes, which will begin on screen when you start.
I do. Thanks very much. Good evening, members, and thank you for the opportunity to speak this evening. My name is Ollie Cooper, and I'm the planning agent for Brent's housing team, the applicant for this planning application. This application is part of Brent's new council homes programme, which seeks to reduce the high housing waiting list and the number of residents living within temporary accommodation in the borough, by building new homes within council-owned sites that meet the needs of the Brent's residents. The proposals as presented before you seek to complement the character of the area through providing 21 high-quality homes, 100% London affordable rent, which is much needed in the borough. 7 of these homes, 33%, are family-sized, which exceeds the policy requirement. The applicant has engaged in extensive discussions with officers in evolving the proposals, with all dwellings designed to meet and exceed key housing design standards, being dual aspect, whilst meeting M42 compliance, i.e. accessibility standards, in the majority of instances to ensure inclusivity for all. Private amenity space is provided for each unit. The proposals result in the modest loss, equivalent of about 7% of the estate's open space, albeit substantial enhancements are proposed to the retained open space, including 2 large areas of landscape play space, and which will be for use for existing and future residents. We are planting 6 more trees than are being removed, which is a net increase in the number of trees on site. Your tree officer does not object to the scheme. The proposals deliver a policy compliant urban greening factor of 0.407, which means that there is an increase in green cover across the site. The scheme has been carefully designed to respect the amenity of neighbours. For example, we have designed it in a way that the windows of the new homes cannot see into the gardens or primary windows of the neighbouring properties, thus following guidance from the Brent Design Guide. The size of the proposed buildings replicates what is currently on site and has been supported by the planning and urban design officers. The applicant has submitted a daylight and sunlight assessment in support of the application, which confirms that the proposals are compliant with the professional guidance in terms of impacts on the daylight and sunlight received by the surrounding properties. And the highways officer has confirmed that the provision of 88 parking spaces across the development is acceptable, considering census data and survey evidence. Cycle parking is also provided in line with London Plan standards. The proposal was considered to align with the development plan as a whole, particularly according with the overarching objective of delivering new and affordable family homes within existing residential locations. We therefore respectfully request that members approve this application in line with the officer recommendation. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. I just want to ask a question about accessibility, sort of a question in 2 parts. I mean, obviously, just what steps have you taken to make the new units accessible? And secondly, what on the existing units, their accessibility, the impact of the new developments on the accessibility to the existing units? So it's a question in 2 parts.
Of course. Yes. So in terms of generating level access for the proposed residents, they will have meeting the majority of M42 accessibility building regs guidelines. I think potentially my colleague from the architect, Sean Rafferty, could potentially provide a little bit more on the actual design measures. Potentially, it might be easier. Sean?
Yeah, good afternoon. Can everybody hear me?
Yes, I think so.
Yes,
yeah.
excellent. Yeah, just in terms, I suppose, of the 2 parts, in terms of the new units, excuse me, the new homes, the vast majority are M42 accessible. We have over-provided in terms of what's known as M43, or wheelchair accessible units. I think we're of the 21 units providing, some 14% are M43. Which is an over-provision for the number of units that we're providing. In terms of improving the access across the state, we're introducing 2 new 2-metre wide minimum footpaths to the immediate south of Block A as you come into the estate of Milverton Road, and running parallel to what we call as Block C as well. So we're actually increasing the amount of footpaths within the estate, and those footpaths are meeting the minimum as set out by the guides to streets, so a minimum of 2 metres. So in some regards, we're actually improving the pedestrian journey for everybody across the state by making new and wider footpaths.
Okay, thank you. I mean, you've obviously heard also concerns from an existing resident that the footpaths won't be accessible. How would you respond to that? And what further steps can you take to work with the existing residents to ensure that the site is still fully accessible?
Well, excuse me, I think one of the main things should the application be granted, one of the next steps would obviously be a construction management plan. So there obviously will be some impacts during construction, but that would be carefully coordinated with the chosen contractor to make sure the site is as available for all, and the phasing would be quite important in terms of how the scheme is developed to make sure that there is routes available during construction. And like I said, we've made sure that any of the new landscape proposals in the central garden are accessible to all as well.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions, Councillor Chappell?
In terms of the trees being proposed, the 20 trees to replace the 14 being removed, yeah, how mature do we know how mature they're going to be? Like, do we have a plan for? Is it replacing sort of like for like, or
I
what's the
think
plan there?
we've actually got our tree consultant in on the call as well, Richard. So I don't know if Richard could provide a little bit more context on that potentially.
I can't provide the planting specifications for the trees that are going to be planted, I'm afraid.
Well, I think we've obviously got a detailed landscaping scheme which has been conditioned as part of the development proposal, which will be worked up in tandem with officers and in consultation with them to deliver a landscaping scheme which is adoptable. It's going to benefit all, and yeah, we'll obviously increase screening and screening across the site. No worries.
Yep. Okay. Councillor Maurice was next.
The trees that are going to be renewed, going to be replaced, that are going to be taken out and replaced, are they good trees? Are they good working trees? That's what I'd like to know.
It's probably a question for officers, to be honest, that one, Councillor Maurice. So can you just put a pin in that and we'll come back to it in a minute. Councillor Dixon, did you have your hand up?
You might say the same to me, Matt, so I'll be careful. I think that, did you do some, in terms of consultation and concern about the tree, did you reduce the number of properties that you were going to?
We did indeed, yeah. So at pre-application, then upon submission, we were a 22 unit scheme, and then we removed one of the blocks basically to remove pressure, and also what is block A, we sort of refined the massing in that location to be able to preserve some of the more mature trees there. So steps have been made to try and make it most respectful as it can be.
Okay, thank you. I think people are itching to get on with the questions for officers. So I propose we just let Ollie take his seat and we move on to those questions. So Councillor Maurice, I'll let you go first and you can ask your question to the team.
Well, the question is the same. Well, not all trees are good. The trees that are being removed, are they good trees? In other words, are they a job properly?
Thanks. I might let Julie come in a second, but just to say, of the 14 trees being lost, none are category A, obviously the highest value. One's category B, 12 are category C, and one is category U. As I think the applicant mentioned, one of the trees next to block A, which was considered of a higher importance, that's been retained, and I know that Julie's been speaking to the applicant to ensure that during any sort of construction process, that's carefully sort of managed. I'll let Julie come in if she's got any other comments.
I think generally it's category A or category B trees that are considered significant and should be retained where possible. I think T1, which is the large ash tree right adjacent to the entrance, is the one we've been negotiating with block A to retain. There is another category B tree, T4, that's being removed from that area. All the other trees that are being removed are category C or below. So category U, we would just agree to anyway, because they're in effect dangerous. So all the other trees are category C.
Is there any way that you can keep the category A and possibly the category B trees I feel that is actually very important.
Yeah, I think the only other category B tree that's proposed to be removed is T4, which is necessary to achieve block A.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's difficult. I mean, obviously, certainly blocks A and block C are obviously to the kind of fringes of the site. The key trees are, within that kind of central open space. So all the replanting is going on within that space, rather than obviously the fringes. So, as I think was mentioned, we do have a condition, condition 16, which is a very detailed landscaping condition. So obviously the intention is to work very closely in terms of making sure replacement species are, of different maturity, so that we don't just get the loss of 14 trees and then it takes 20, 30 years for young saplings to come up. So that's all good, been thought about.
Okay, thank you. Just on the just while we're on sort of trees and greening, I think it's obviously the urban greening factor has been contested by some of the speakers we had earlier. I just wanted to see how sure the council are of their figures on this, and sort of what your comments are on the greening factor of the development as a whole.
Thanks, Chair. So yes, I mean, I think this is an issue that's myself and the tree officer have also spoken to objectors about. We are pretty, but we're clear that the score given in terms of being over, obviously the key is it being over 0.4 for a residential development this size. I think there's potentially been some confusion about, in terms of the actual figure, in terms of the existing green space being provided. That isn't just the only thing that's covered. It's the surface area of the trees. It's the different types of grass, the species in particular. So it's not just a matter of just the amount of amenity space. So I think it is something. I mean, and the other point I think that's been raised is about Clement Close isn't actually a location site, so we're taking into account just that's actually important in terms of being outside the red line boundary. So we're only looking at the actual space within 2 to 78. So again, I don't know if Julie's got any other comments or.
Sorry, I'm not able to comment in detail on urban greening factor. Sorry.
Fine. And then just on a similar note, in terms of play provision, we sort of heard that, obviously there's children already live there and there's children will be moving into new developments, should application be granted. We're sort of confident that maximum amount of play area has been made for them and that is compliant.
Yeah, so we've got, I don't think we can bring up a slide, but within the central green space, there is a sort of area of play equipment, and the intention is for that to be enhanced. I think it's slide 47. Sorry, actually, it's slide. Sorry, 75. So obviously this only gives you an overview, but if you can see an image on the top right, which gives it's the existing play equipment within the site. So the intention is for that to be enhanced, to be improved. Again, there's a condition within the landscaping condition, which is condition 16. There is details of exactly what type of play equipment will be secured. So again, for details to be considered and assessed by us as officers as well. And we do think that there is an overall enhancement which will benefit obviously existing occupiers.
So I think you've satisfied me that the quality of play space, but the quantity is also sort of an issue. Is there any extra play space to take account of the extra children? I'm happy to take another question if you need a second to look it up if we just come back to that. Councillor Bacon, please.
I was there on Saturday. I just noticed there's bin area and there's cycle parking as well. Like in terms of the bike storage, where would that be replaced? And the bin storage, where would it be moved to?
Yeah, so the individual homes within blocks A and block C receive their own, because they're their own homes really. So they're their individual bin stores and local stores within the individual blocks. I don't think that blocks D and E are affected in terms of loss of bin storage, but then block F, there is a separate unit just to the north of that block, which will be as well as providing for the new occupiers in terms of communal areas. It also provides for the existing occupiers as well. So we do feel that it meets kind of standards for both future occupiers and existing.
Thank you. Any other questions at this point? Councillor Akram.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to touch on the parking arrangement. So with the proposed development, the potential will be 92.5 spaces that will be required. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong. Currently, I think it shows there's about 75 spaces. Is there a risk that we'll have a possibility that there'll be lack of parking spaces with the additional numbers that are going to be added?
Yeah, just a couple of things. Yeah, just to clarify, the 92 spaces, it's actually a maximum standard. So that's the level they mustn't go above. Proposed provision is the 8 spaces. Parking surveys that were done by the applicant suggest at the moment about 43 cars park in the area at night. Broken that up would give suggests demand for about 79 cars. So the provision of 88 spaces gives some surplus. So I'm not concerned that there's likely to be any overspill.
As we also often know as well, the trend of car ownership is downward, not upward in London as well. So that might affect in the future. Sorry, any other members of the committee like to come in at this stage? Okay, if we could just go maybe back to the meeting space. I'm just noting that there is a cumulative shortfall of 28 square meters, which is sort of where I was coming from in terms of enough space for children to play if they've got the best equipment in the world, but also the wider areas that they can play in there. We sort of the report makes a judgment that it's negligible. Just maybe wanted some thinking behind that, and hopefully that clarifies my earlier question.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor. So yes, we've got an overall shortfall of 28 square meters in terms of the actual new homes, but we're balancing that against I think there's about 5,570 square meters overall within the existing open space, which, given that we have 88 units, well, it serves 88 units, but also around 30 of those have their own sort of private gardens already. We do think that there is given the sort of density of it overall, we do think there is an over provision overall. So that what's there at the moment in terms of that, certainly that central green space sort of benefits the new occupiers as well as the existing, and we do think there's overall that sort of shortfall is it can be balanced out.
Okay, thank you. And then final question for me. Obviously, we've heard about this, sort of being an area of flood risk. I think at point 116, 116, it refers to like the flooded survey as being satisfactory. Satisfactory is not necessarily sort of a word that would fill me with confidence. So I just want to sort of check what that means in reality.
Yeah, I think probably acceptable is a better word to use, I would say. But in terms of the greenfield runoff, we're really looking at the worst case scenario. So over, as I say, 100-year basis, what's the worst that could be thrown at us? We do think that level in terms of 1.0, normally for a kind of green site, you'd get between 2 and 7 litres per second. So I think the bigger point there is that in terms of runoff, we have permeable paving, so that rain, when it gets obviously infiltrated in, there is that base to protect it. We've got other measures in terms of sustainable drainage, so sort of water butts, green roofs, brown roofs. that are being integrated into the scheme. So we do feel that that's an acceptable level that the sort of, can be mitigated very easily.
Okay, thank you. And then it may be a different part of the council that runs obviously the building management stuff as well, but we've heard about, obviously concerns about accessibility, during the building phase and otherwise. Sort of, is there anything we can do in terms of, conditions or asking the applicant to work more closely with existing residents, etc., to try and overcome those worries? Because, we obviously wouldn't want people sort of to be trapped in their houses whilst development is ongoing.
Are you talking about sort of construction management or that type of thing?
Yeah, I think that would be that might be the answer. That would be part of it. But I just want to say how we can just be reassured and make sure that it's done in the most conscientious way, which sort of takes into the needs of existing residents, particularly those who may use wheelchairs and other forms of accessibility.
Yeah, I mean, I think that we do have a condition around construction environmental management, so that really looks at sort of mitigating against the worst parts of the construction process. So that would include, I think, liaising with residents as much as possible to ensure, that, as I say, the worst impacts in terms of noise and disturbance and dust, and as you say, accessibility during the construction works are sort of fully considered.
Okay, thank you. Any other members of the committee like to comment at this point? Yeah, Councillor Baker.
Just a quick one. I mean, in terms of EV charging, are there's going to be any?
Well, not really providing any new parking as such, so no, there isn't, to be honest. No.
But disabled parking bay, are we keeping any disabled bays for the residents?
There's none specifically proposed. Again, there's no new parking. If people require a disabled bay, they can apply to have one marked on the street. But as I say, there's no new parking proposed. It's just using the existing parking that's on the street already.
Right, thank you. Don't see anyone else who wants to indicate at this point. So I think sorry, Councillor Seelan, just jumping in at the end.
Thank you, Chair. Very quick one for transportation. If any, seems to be it's more than a few blocks. Is there any additional what do you call disabled parking being allocated or created for this development? But looks said to be it's a car-free scheme, but this is one of the requirements. Is it fulfilling that?
Yeah, there's no new space. I think that's been asked and answered already. So I think we'll move on. Okay, so I think we're in a position to take a vote now because I don't think there's any further questions. So can I ask those who are in favour of the recommendation to raise their hand at this point? Okay, so that is unanimous.